Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you about disks or permanent storage devices, file systems, and partitions. And I'm going to explain how do they relate to each other. Okay, so let's talk about this. And I actually draw a picture beforehand so I can just kind of move around the picture and explain things instead of having to draw it, because then the tutorial would be really long, okay? Okay, so let's talk about the thing that bothered me for some time, to be really honest with you, and that is the following questions. What is a partition exactly? What is a file system exactly? And how do they relate to each other? Okay, so let's go from top to down, from the biggest to the smallest. First, let's talk about the hardware, the permanent storage devices. There are many permanent storage devices, but let's focus on the ones most people use in their computer for permanent storage. They can be either hard drives or solid-state drives. For example, my laptop has a solid-state drive. Permanent storage device is the physical device your data is stored on. Again, the term also includes USB drives, CDs, and DVDs, but let's focus on hard drives and solid-state drives for this purpose. Let's call them disks. Okay? Now we have partitions, and basically what partitions are, if you can see from this image, we have one partition right here, and then we have another partition here. Partitions are actually subdivisions of the whole disk. A disk can, so basically a disk is a piece of hardware, okay? So imagine that there's a huge box which starts, let me just find my, okay, so a huge box that starts like this right here and goes here and basically encompasses the entire image. This is the disk, okay? Now a disk is subdivided into multiple partitions. And partitions are defined on a small area of the disk called a partition table. Okay, so this partition table right here is actually the area of the disk which defines the partitions. Okay, and then within a partition, okay, so we have a disk. Disk is the hardware. This is the broadest thing we can talk about. Then we have partitions, and information about those partitions is stored in the partition table. And then every single partition has a file system. And the file system is basically a hierarchy of files and directories you are accustomed to interacting with. A file system resembles a database. And so basically a file system looks like this. You have some file system data structures, and then they actually sort of like point to file data. So basically you have a data structure which describes a file, and among them there's a pointer which says, okay, this file is actually located somewhere here. So think of this as like a pool of files, and there's a lot of files in this file data box, and then there's a certain data structure which says, okay, well, I have a file, and it's file permissions are these, and all of these other informations is stored here, and the file itself is actually located, for example, in this box. Okay, so we have a pointer which actually points to the location of the file data in this box. Okay, so this is a conceptual thing. So if we want to access a file, let's say, so let's view the use case of accessing a file. If we want to access a file, we first consult the partition table, which is right here, to see which partition we need to access. Then after we access that partition, and let's say that we are accessing this partition right here, which I'm just highlighting, so this partition right here, we consult the file system database to find the data we are looking for. Okay, and the file system database tells us, okay, this file is stored, for example, here, and then we just kind of follow it and actually access the file itself. Okay, so this is simplified version of what is happening, but this is a fairly accurate image. So there's a lot of technical details, to tell you the truth, and I'm not even sure that I understand all of them. but I do think that we kind of covered the gist of it with this tutorial, okay? And I think this is important to understand conceptually, because there's a lot of confusion between what's a file system, what's a partition, how does it relate to the hard drive, how does it relate to the permanent storage devices, more broadly speaking, which includes solid state drives, etc., and also removable devices, such as USB drives, because USB drives can also be formatted. That is, the USB drives also have file systems. Okay, so in order for you to understand, file systems, but partitions are used for subdivisions of the entire disk. So, in order for us to understand all of those terms, we need to understand how they relate to one another. And again, we have looked at these terms from a perspective of, okay, we have a permanent storage device which is a hard drive or a solid state drive. But again, as I just said, even a USB device has a file system, okay? So we need to understand what those are. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something useful. I hope you learned something which you are going to remember when dealing with some things which are related to permanent storage devices and partitions and file systems. And I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Talk soon.